Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com for free premium picks. Look us up in the sports section on Roku. We're there, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, from time to time here online, I'll talk about a fighter with a very big reputation. Right, let's say Saul Alvarez or Manny Pacquiao. Then I'll get myself in trouble by actually criticizing the fighter. Right, by actually pointing out that, Manny Pacquiao these days isn't the fighter he once was, that Saul Alvarez lacks foot speed. One time I talked about Joe Louis here online, and I said, Joe Louis was great for his era, but look at his films, it looks to me like he lacked foot speed. And I got a bevy of comments. Right, I'm guessing there was a Joe Louis crowd out there, many people over 50 years of age, who were simply outraged and disgusted by my critique. Fair enough. Understand, I'm just offering my opinion. Right? My opinion's just one opinion. Everyone's opinion, quite frankly, matters. Right? Is valid. Now, with that in mind, let me talk about a fighter who, in my opinion, is the exact opposite. In other words, this is a guy who is operating in broad daylight, who for some reason we keep overlooking his greatness. Right? Maybe it's a style thing. But this guy, simply put, in my opinion, is one of the great middleweight champions of all time. Now, before I talk about Sergio Martinez, let me just give a little background story. Put everything in context. One of the guys who I admire the most in terms of just his approach to life. Really a guy who I've never met. You know what they say, never meet your idols. But who's always been a role model for me is Bill Russell, the Celtic great. Now, Bill Russell is a guy who, understand, got cut from his junior high school basketball team. Right? He's a guy who only got a scholarship to one college. Right? His coach at that college was a guy named Phil Wilpert. And understand, Russell was a guy who broke rules. Right? Russell was just trying to win. Whatever the sports orthodoxy was at the time, if it didn't make sense to Russell, Russell did what he thought was the better thing to do to win the game. So he and his coach butted heads, because his coach was an inside-the-box guy, and Russell, a lefty, was outside the box. Now understand, Russell brings the art of blocking shots to a new level in basketball. And at the University of San Francisco, Russell says that with regard to his coach, and let me read the quote, he would watch me jump up and block shots, and then say, but that's not the way it's supposed to be done. A defensive man is not supposed to leave his feet. Understand, the USF Dons were the dominant college basketball team of the 1950s. Bill Russell would go on to get the United States the gold medal in the '56 Olympics. Nobody has more rings in NBA history than Bill Russell, right? He is, simply put, an all-time great. He changed the game. The point is, his coach had a set way of doing things. Russell, a guy with little leverage starting out, right? Not heavily recruited, not a big name. Bay Area guy playing at a Bay Area school, decided that regardless of what the book says, that a good defender doesn't leave his feet. Russell decided he would leave his feet. Right? The game hasn't landed back on the floor ever since. Now let's talk about Sergio Martinez. Right? I don't know what this guy has to do to get the recognition that he has earned. Understand, in the ring, this guy has few peers. Right? One of the foremost boxing organizations in the world is the World Boxing Council. Right? You know, not all belts are created equal. If you're a WBC belt holder, you know that belt has some extra weight around your waist. Now understand, Martinez has been the middleweight champ for years, but what you need to realize is years ago, in 2010 and in 2012, Sergio Martinez was the WBC Boxer of the Year. Right? Those in the game know who he is. Let me go one step further. The sports writers, the BWAA, named him their Fighter of the Year in 2010. Right? Understand, Martinez, since then, has been on a run through the middleweight division. Right? Knocking out guys like Darren Barker and Sergio Zurich, who had not been beaten before. Right? Shutting out, in my opinion, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. until the very last round of the fight. And understand, Chavez Jr. had not been beaten before. Right? He beats Kelly Pavlik. Understand, Kelly Pavlik at one time was so highly thought of that when Pavlik fought Bernard Hopkins, Pavlik was a better than 2-1 favorite in the fight. Right? Take a look at the fight. Take a look at Pavlik's eyes at the end of the fight. Pavlik was beaten up. Right? Understand, Martinez is beating guys in fights where he's either the underdog, right, or it's competitively matched up. Look at the odds before the Chavez Jr. fight. Now let's talk about Martinez for a second. I believe the problem Martinez has, and Martinez is a southpaw just like Bill Russell, is the same problem Bill Russell had. Right? There's some boxing orthodoxy out there that talks about what fighters are supposed to do in the ring. Right? Trainers want fighters doing certain things that Sergio Martinez doesn't do. Right? It's the same thing with Bill Russell. His coach wanted him to never leave his feet. Right? Bill Russell starts leaving his feet and becomes the dominant shot blocker in basketball. Right? Now, Sergio Martinez keeps his hands low. Right? Now, let me say this. Look a little bit deeper into Martinez's past. And what you're going to find out is the reason Martinez is a rule breaker is because he didn't have his first professional fight until he was 22 years old. And to understand, a lot of the guys in the game today boxed throughout their teens. They learned boxing from an early age. They had role models they patterned themselves after. They learned what they believe is the right way to do things. That right way includes keeping your hands up to block shots. Now, I'll agree. That works for 95% of all fighters. Right? If you want to know the way to fight that reduces risks, you better learn how to put your hands up. right? You don't want to fight an Donaire without having a hand up to protect yourself against his left hook, right? But as Bill Russell used to say, the great ones are always different. And Martinez, with his hands low, is able to turn that into his advantage, because Martinez has the reflexes and has the balance to throw hard shots from that position and to get out of the way defensively before he gets hit, right? So as a result, boxing's about angles. If you're fighting Martinez and you come in and he is bent at the waist, it's an unusual stance. He's not a fighter standing up with his hands up like this most of the time. Rather, he is bent at the waist with his hands dangling. You're going to wonder to yourself, what the hell is going on here? Then when he's able to throw punches, you would think a guy with his hands dangling, leaning forward, wouldn't be able to get leverage on his punches. But Martinez is a full-body athlete. He's able to shift his weight quickly. He's more of a ballet performer than he is a traditional boxer. So as you come in and as you're trying to figure out how to deal with a fighter who keeps his hands so low that they're around your knees, Martinez is able to lean up and throw punches over your guard. I believe it's almost impossible to defend against or prepare for, because what sparring partner fights like he does? I think the mistake fighters make in looking at films of Martinez, in fact, I believe it might be the mistake the public makes, is you look at him and you say, this guy is so unorthodox. There is no way he can be effective. Then, of course, you're in the ring with him. And as he has his hands low and bends at the waist, Martinez most of the time is bent forward. Right? He's bent forward. His head looks exposed. He has his hands low. Right? When you see him, you don't realize that he's an above average puncher. Right? You don't get the knockouts he's gotten. Not being an above average puncher. Right? Understand. He ends fights. Think about the Matthew Macklin fight. The Martin Murray fight is interesting, because, of course, Murray, another unbeaten fighter, wouldn't come inside to actually challenge Martinez. Right? But if you bum rush Martinez with his hands low, you might end up on the canvas. Paul Williams. Right? Another very highly touted fight. Right? Where the odds were close. I believe Williams is favored. And Sergio Martinez closed the show. Right? Let's talk about what else Martinez does. When you watch a Floyd Mayweather, who's more of a classical fighter, and Mayweather belongs in the conversation, because when I mention Martinez, I'm talking about a guy who I personally feel is one of the best pound for pound in the sport. Right? When you watch Floyd, Floyd is relaxed. Floyd's ready to go 12 rounds. What you don't see Floyd doing is bobbing like this from the opening bell. That's not who he is. Right? Floyd comes out, he has his hands up, he's ready to defend himself. Right? He's looking at you. There's a certain calmness with Floyd Mayweather. Martinez gives you the opposite look. Right? He's bouncing. It's a tempo thing. Sometimes he has his hands up, very rarely. Most of the time his hands are down and he's bouncing like this. You wonder what the hell he's doing. Right? But understand what that bounce does is it destabilizes an opponent. You can't get the timing down. Martinez starts to impose his rhythm on the opponent. Right? The other problem too is the bounce is deceptive, because wherever Martinez is in the bounce, whether he's back or whether he's forward, he can throw punches. And again, it's hard to read his body, because you think that he can't throw power shots in certain positions, but yet he can. Let's talk about his upper body. A guy who's leaning forward like Martinez is effectively hiding his body. Right? He's not standing upright unless, and I know I'm going to hear about the Margarito fight, unless he gets smothered like he did against Margarito, who I believe is historically underrated. Right? But understand, Martinez doesn't stand up straight where you're able to drill his body. This midsection is always hidden by the lean. Right? So I'm reading now about this Miguel Cotto fight. I'm reading Freddie Roach claiming that Cotto is going to hit Martinez in the body. Good luck with that. Understand, the Margarito fight is from more than a decade ago. Right? I believe it's a 2000 or 2001 fight. It's now 2014. When's the last time you saw a Sergio Martinez fight where a guy has hit him with clean body shots? Folks, I'm here to tell you it doesn't happen. Let's talk about this a little bit more. Martinez's footwork is a bit curious, right? He moves around the ring so much that there are times, you saw it in the Martin Murray fight, you saw it in the Kelly Pavlik fight, right? There have been other fights where Martinez has gone down, right? And I don't mean like he did at the end of the Chavez Jr. fight where he gets caught. Right there he's caught and he goes down. I'm talking about like in the Paul Williams fight, the first one, where I believe he goes down in the first or second round, and he's not really hurt. Right? In the Kelly Pavlik fight, he's not really hurt. It's just that as he moves around the ring, very unorthodox, sometimes his feet get tangled up. And so if the other fighter hits him at that moment, he'll go down. Right? Those are knockdowns. I'm not here to say they're not knockdowns. But understand, when he goes down, he's lucid. He's not hurt. Right? He's hurt at the end of Chavez Jr., but apart from that, when you see him down in fights, usually it's because his feet have gotten tangled up. Right? Because he pivots close to an opponent. So often his leg will hit their leg. Right? Very unorthodox style. Now I understand the boxing purists are cringing. A guy falling down in fights where he's not badly hurt? I understand it. A guy with his hands low? I understand it. But understand, just like Bill Russell turned off traditionalists in the 50s, that's the story with Martinez today. Like Russell, he is great at what he does. Right? Martinez is a master at the ambush. The interesting thing with Martinez is most people don't view him as an ambush fighter. But in my opinion, that's what he is. He has a style where he's looking for openings. He's hard to read. And then he can leap in and empty the gun. And when he leaps in, the punching power is bigger than middleweight. I know he's 5'10". I know he came up from the lighter weights. He's a big puncher at 160 pounds. We think about Golovkin and we think about Quillin. Right? Understand, Martinez walks around in the 170s and is an outsized puncher at 160. Right? So, let me also add, and it's kind of interesting, a guy who drops his hands like that. The biggest secret with Sergio Martinez is that he wants you to pursue him. The best footage I've seen against Martinez, where a guy has methodically deconstructed his style, is the Matthew Macklin fight. Because Macklin's on his back foot. Martinez, believe it or not, had his moments against Antonio Margarito. I know that's a famous fight. But the Macklin fight, Martinez is befuddled by Macklin on his back foot. Let me say this. I don't believe Miguel Cotto on his back foot is as effective as Cotto is on his front foot. Right? I believe on his back foot, Cotto was getting sliced and diced by Austin Trout. I believe on his back foot, Cotto was having big problems in a photo finish fight against Joshua Clottey. Right? Cotto on his back foot, I don't believe has enough to make the fight competitive against Sergio Martinez. Cotto on his front foot against Martinez, in my opinion, and we'll see how it plays, likely gets knocked out. Right? Understand, Cotto, for all of his glory, is just visiting 160 pounds. Excuse me. This is boxing today. This is how ridiculous boxing is. Cotto, who's fighting for the 160 title, is actually visiting 159 pounds. Isn't that the ridiculously foolish catch weight that they have for this fight? I'm hoping fans out there say, look, enough. We're going to punish guys who foolishly in negotiations say, I want a catch weight of minus a pound. Right? Ridiculous. Right? But be that as it may, Cotto's not a real middleweight. Cotto, as hard as he hits, and I know that Delvin Rodriguez fight looks great on film, doesn't hit, in my opinion, remotely as hard as Sergio Martinez. So as you watch this fight, keeping in mind that Martinez has been the middleweight champion for 4 years, if Sergio Martinez deconstructs and demolishes Miguel Cotto, as he has other fighters, right? Isn't that second fight, the Paul Williams knockout, one of the more definitive and scarier knockouts you've seen? Right? Let me ask you, has Chavez Jr., and I know he looked bad against Brian Vera, right? The first fight, but has Chavez Jr. ever looked as bad as he does for the first 11 rounds against Sergio Martinez? Weren't there a lot of people, especially those in Europe, who thought that Sergio in Zurich, who beat Joel Julio, right? Aren't there a lot of people who thought he was going to beat Sergio Martinez? Kelly Pavlik. I know Hopkins threw down a masterpiece against Kelly Pavlik, right? But that was at a heavier weight. Aren't you surprised at how good Martinez looked against Kelly Pavlik? Also, as great as Hopkins was, and that's one of my favorite fights, against Pavlik, did Pavlik's face look the way it did at the end of the Hopkins fight that it looked like at the end of the Sergio Martinez fight? Why are so many people so certain that some of these other guys at middleweight, Peter Quillen, for example, would have a shot against Sergio Martinez? I don't believe he does. Right? So, let's just say, when you're looking at Martinez, I want you to think about what Bill Russell famously said. He said, the great ones are always different. I can tell you the first time I saw Joe Montana and Bill Walsh in football, I thought, what are these guys doing? Right? You know, they were throwing to pick up 3 yards. It seemed like a gimmick to me. I can tell you the first time I saw Magic Johnson, when he played in college at Michigan State, and he was throwing alley-oops to a guy named Greg Kelser. I can tell you the announcer spent a portion of that game wondering why Magic Johnson was playing guard. Right? Johnson looked like he was a Harlem Globetrotter. right? He'd look at the crowd and he'd be throwing passes this way. It looked like a gimmick. Johnson looked like he would be his team's best forward, but yet here he was out at guard. And the announcer was saying, gee, why doesn't Johnson let other guards play guard? And then, of course, you realize that the scoreboard wasn't fooled. The scoreboard understood Johnson's greatness. I believe it's time we start looking at Sergio Martinez. I know I'm hard here online with regard to Pacquiao, with regard to, Saul Alvarez. Okay, fair enough, right? But when I see a guy who I feel is underrated, I hope you give him a look. Somehow. A guy who's won Boxer of the Year multiple times. A guy who right now is one of boxing's better champions is being overlooked to the point where his opponent, who hasn't even fought at middleweight, Miguel Cotto, thinks that the champ's the B-side in the fight and has demanded and received permission to be the last one to enter the ring. You gotta be kidding me. Sergio Martinez, in broad daylight, has been one of the better fighters now for years. When he retires, I believe we're going to reassess his career and understand that we've been lucky to have him. This isn't flavor of the month. This is a great career. I know he's 39 years old. The only question here for me is whether the injuries that required surgery have been fully healed. If they have been, I'm expecting Miguel Cotto to find himself way out of his league. I like Martinez in the fight. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. You can talk about boxing. You can talk about Bill Russell and the USF Dons. You can talk about other guys who you feel are outside the box in sports. Let's have the talk. Thanks for stopping by.